Can you imagine living in a place which is prone to rocket attacks, where at any moment you may find yourself and your family having to run for safety into a bomb shelter? Today I am going to be speaking with Rabbi Kinneret Shiryon, my good friend and rabbinical school classmate, who was in her bomb shelter in Modi'in, Israel, a town halfway between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Hundreds of rockets have been raining down on Israel from the Gaza Strip, including locations close to her house, forcing her to run for cover. Rabbi Shiryon is the first woman to serve as a rabbi in Israel. She founded Kehilat Yozma in Modi'in in 1997 and served as its rabbi for 20 years. She's an active member of a group called Women Building Bridges, a group of Muslim and Christian Palestinians and Jewish women from Modi'in who are building friendships with one another. Welcome to this special edition of Spiritually Speaking. Kinneret, it's great to have you here via Google Hangout in Modi'in. And first of all, I wanted to start off by asking you exactly where you are right now.
I am sitting in my miklat, which means bomb shelter. It's a very small room that's attached to the house. I'm one of the fortunate few that actually has a miklat in her home. Many people have to run outside to a communal miklat.
I know that if you're living along the southern border near Gaza, you only have a few seconds to get to a miklat or a shelter.
About 25 seconds.
Which is unbelievable. And how long would somebody in Modi'in have from the time the sirens go off?
I don't know what the exact amount of time is, but we have more time because we're further away.
Would you say it's a minute or two, or?
Maybe a minute. Could be 90 seconds, something like that. But 90 seconds is substantially more than 25 seconds.
Right, which is still an unbelievably quick amount of time. So are rockets still falling in Israel right now?
There is an official ceasefire, and yet rockets are still falling. Yes, the answer is yes. This morning they declared a ceasefire, and there were 5 rockets that hit. And the Home Front Command has told the people on the south not to go to school, not to send the children to school, and not to go to their jobs. So even though there's an official ceasefire, the rockets haven't stopped.
And could you take us through what it was like the other night when you heard an explosion right near your house?
Well, there was a siren that went off. I went directly into the safe space, tried to close the very heavy door, but since I had just been in a motorcycle accident, I didn't really have the strength to close it all the way, so I closed it as best as I could and just hoped for the best. And then I heard a boom outside, and you're supposed to stay in the shelter for 10 minutes after the explosion, after you hear the explosion. And when I came out, I had the news, of course, was running on the television all day, and I saw that the Iron Dome missile hit the rocket and exploded it, and that's what I heard. And the explosion took place very close to my home. I live in a community that's called Maccabim, and the community where it hit is Re'ut, which is about 5 minutes away by car.
When a rocket explodes in midair like that, is there a lot of debris that falls from the sky, or what is that like?
It depends how high it's hit. If it's hit high, then by the time it hits the ground, it could already have dissolved to pieces. But if it's closer to the ground, then yes, there is debris.
So that's a danger also. So how many times since you've been living there have you had to run into the miklat?
There was, I guess last year, there was also action on the southern border, and we had to go in on time. Modi'in is actually in the middle of the country. It is halfway between the city of Tel Aviv, which is along the coast, and Jerusalem, which is up in the Judean hills. So we're not considered either the north or the south.
You had told me that your community actually provides shelter for families who are in the south near Gaza or in the north when there's a lot of rocket attacks going on. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, what happens is the community opens its doors and its members sign up and they say that families can come, that they want to get away from the intense danger of all the rockets flying. They can come up and they can spend the weekend with the family, which is really quite beautiful. There are 300,000 children who are living under this threat all the time. This morning on the radio, I heard they were interviewing one of the kindergarten teachers, and during the interview, the silent went off. You heard the children crying, and you heard the staff gathering them all around, trying to be very calm and to bring them into the safe space. Children are traumatized. Families are traumatized. So it's really wonderful when other families in other parts of Israel that are less under attack open up their homes to let people come and just have a breather from the tension and the fear.
Yeah, it's unbelievable to I can't even imagine what that must be like, and the trauma and the fear all the time. And I know you lived in the United States for quite a long period of time, and you've been in Israel for a long time. So how would you describe the difference between what it's like to live in the States and what it's like to live in Israel regarding that sense of security versus fear?
On a day-to-day level, I think Israelis feel very secure. Their children are free to roam, and there's a big sense of family. At the same time, I notice that when I leave the country, that I kind of breathe a little bit easier. It's as if you're waiting for the next shoe to fall. You're always waiting because there's always this tension in the air. We don't have official peace agreement with the Palestinians, and they have extreme groups that are attacking, even when the more moderates are not, and that controls the entire state of affairs. What we hope is that the government, at least the Israeli government, and the organizations, the Palestinian organizations that are in control, can try and put a top on the more extreme groups, so that it doesn't escalate into a full outright war.
So Modi'in is actually very close to the West Bank. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about your relationship with some of the Palestinians, some of the Arabs who live near your town?
It's a very sad story because before the first and second Intifada, we had close relationships with them. In Maccabim, we were particularly close to the head of the Hamula, one of the major families at Beit Sira, which is the Arab village right near us. In Beit Sira, they have a lot of nurseries, and most of Maccabim, all of the beautiful gardening was all taken care of by our Palestinian friends. Our relationship has been stopped between the two communities. From that point on, it's been very tense. We don't have the same relationship that we had in the past. But I'm part of a group which is called Women Building Bridges, and it's made up of Jewish women from Modi'in and Palestinian women in East Jerusalem and Sur Baha, which is another community outside of Jerusalem, where we meet once a month and really forge warm and trusting relationships between these women. I think our next meeting will be interesting in light of this latest tension. It opens up more of the emotional scars that we all carry. But because we've been meeting for a long time and we've been building trust with each other, it just means it's a little harder to talk about it. But I think it's the test of our relationships, that we are building personal relationships that go beyond government decisions and politicians and what happens on the outside. Because I think in the end, you have two people who just want to have the best opportunities for their children. They want to live quiet lives. They want to be able to provide for their families. And that's on the Jewish side as well as on the Palestinian side.
Absolutely. So what are your hopes for the near future and the distant future?
Oh, I am an optimist by nature, and I really haven't lost hope for coming to some kind of agreement between the two peoples, and understanding that we both have a tie to this land, and how can we then come to some kind of agreement on how we can share it. Unfortunately, that position isn't shared by the extremists on both sides, the extremists on the Jewish side that think that the entire land should be only for the Jewish people, and the extremists on the Palestinian side that thinks the entire land should only be for the Palestinians. And sometimes it's the extremists that they're the ones that create the reality on the ground level. So all a person can do is really work in their own way, each and every one of us, to build the personal relationship that we can have between us, and hoping that that ripple effect goes out. And so from the grassroots up, we become the dominant voice versus the extremist voice.
Absolutely, that's a beautiful hope, and all we can do is support you in all of your endeavors. And it's great to talk to you. It's amazing to talk to you over there in Modi'in, and our prayers are with you and your community in the state of Israel and everybody in the Middle East. Prayers for peace and health and happiness and less tension in the future.
Oh, those are good prayers, and we accept those prayers. It strengthens us. And so I will just close by saying Shalom and Salam from Modi'in.
Shalom, salam, peace. Take care.
You too.